Hello, welcome to Stronger Roots. We are back here this morning talking with Alisa Divine, and I just happened to come across her information through TikTok and was completely inspired by what she has to say. And Beth, tell us more about Alisa.
Absolutely. We're so thankful to have you today. Thanks for joining us. Alisa Divine, she's a global visionary and leader. She's the CEO of Personal Power Press and the co-author of 5 award-winning and best-selling books on domestic violence. Alisa empowers women to heal their lives, share their stories, create a legacy, and leave a lasting impact. She's been featured guest expert in documentaries, podcasts, global summits, conferences, TV, print media, SiriusXM, iHeartMedia, Florida Public Radio, and in several big cities from Boston and Detroit to Minneapolis and San Diego. Alisa lives in Michigan with her husband and their blended families. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're glad to have you.
It's an honor. Thank you so much, both of you.
Great, wonderful. So, Alisa, we're just going to dive in. I have so many questions to kind of pack into this interview, so we'll just kind of start. So what kind of inspired you to dedicate your life's work to helping survivors of domestic violence, parental alienation, and abuse?
Well, it's interesting because I never initially thought of this being my life work. I was literally on my living room couch, several years ago in a moment of frustration over something that happened with one of my kids and their father. And, I was just kind of like throwing my hands up in the air of like, enough already, and I just had this momentary thought of if I could just help one woman with everything that I have learned that I had to go through, then maybe it all would have been worth it. And it was a fleeting thought. It was, and we don't want to underestimate those intuitive hits, as I like to call them, but it was a fleeting thought. And it was actually a few months later. I was a professional photographer at the time, and I focused on women's portraiture, headshots, things like that, high school senior pictures for girls. And I was at a conference and I was inspired to do a black and white photography campaign. And I was coming back on the flight to go back home, and I had an event at my studio. And there was a woman on the plane next to me, and she said, "What are you going to do for your campaign?" And because she happened to be at the conference. And I said, "I'm thinking about photographing women in black and white who've been through domestic abuse because I have a story of that and I want to show them, show the emotion that they went through because I believe that black and white photography really does that." And she said, "Let me know if you do that. I want to be involved. I have a story of domestic violence too." And I was like, wow. So I went to my studio the next day and we had an event. And there was a woman there who worked at our local domestic violence shelter. And we were talking, and she said, I help women tell their stories of how they escaped the abuse. And I was like, what? Like, that's so interesting. And she said, I've always had like this vision of having them photographed and their hair and makeup done and just helping them to feel beautiful and feel good about themselves. And I said, well, that's what I do, right? And she said, well, maybe we could collaborate somehow. And she sent me like a couple of the stories and I was hooked. But like from that moment, there was a line in the sand. My life would never be the same again. And she ended up like handing me the project because we tried to do it locally, and the reality was the women in the shelter at the time just did not have enough healing and enough space and enough time to be able to tell their story, at that capacity to be shown in a book. So I started going nationally and then globally. And that was my first book, Stories of 21 Women Around the World Who Experienced Abuse, but how they overcame it and turned their pain into power. And so we have those black and white photographs. The woman on the plane next to me participated. She photographed a woman in her state in Georgia. And we we showed the black and white photographs of the emotions they felt during the abuse and then told their stories and then showed a strong, colorful portrait of them in the after, because that was very important to me to let people know that, this is not the end of your story, being an abuse. There's so much that can come after that. And so it really turned into like me not doing photography anymore. And I was invited into a publishing company. All of these synchronicities kept lining up on my path. And I just kept saying yes because it was a way for me to literally help other women, like I mentioned in my moment of frustration, and to feel like I had a channel and outlet without necessarily telling my story. I wasn't quite ready to at the time. I eventually did, as more books came out, and I just felt more courageous, I guess, more articulate in it too. And then it wasn't until this year, 2025, that I started talking about parental alienation on TikTok. And I mean, the first video that I posted on that, it went viral like right away. And I was like, whoa, I literally thought, I mean, I knew I wasn't the only one who's been through that, but I was absolutely shocked at the amount of people who said, me too. This is my story. Same, like I thought I was the only one. And so I've just been riding that wave of focusing, the majority of my content on TikTok on parental alienation, because I feel like it's the perfect flat platform to have those kinds of real conversations.
Yeah. Wow, your story is so inspiring. And I love how life just intersects in these ways. It's kind of like, you have forks in the road. Can I go this way or this way?
I do not have any audio.
Um, okay, so you mentioned a little bit about parental alienation and your video going viral. And what kind of things were you saying during that video? And what do you think struck everybody about parental alienation? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I believe the first one that I posted was a video where it was a letter, to my child. It wasn't like super specific because, um, I'm not interested in calling my kids out, and blaming them or anything, but it was a letter, an inspired letter that could, encompass a lot of people's stories. And so, it was a letter to my child, like saying, I miss you, that this isn't your fault. And what happened was that people like really resonated with that. And you know and and of course there are many nuances too. There were people who were alienated from their children like as an extension of domestic abuse, like after the divorce. But there were also people who maybe were alienated from their children or grandchildren because there was an adult child, who's maybe narcissistic or maybe had unhealed trauma and decided, I'm just not going to talk to my parents anymore. We're cutting them off and they're not going to see the kids anymore. So there's a lot of different nuances, but I think that it was something that people just really resonated with, and they were seeing, and it gave them words that they didn't even realize they were feeling.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so much shame, I think, surrounding parental alienation. And oftentimes people feel like they're on an island, right? Like, what must you have done for your child not to speak to you? And that's one of the hardest things is there's shame that absolutely can devastate you. And I think as mothers, when that parental alienation happens, you question, my goodness, what could I have done? And we're always to blaming ourselves. And is there anything that you can kind of speak to that as far as, the shame that surrounds that? And is that a common kind of characteristics of mothers specifically that have been alienated from their child?
Definitely. I think that shame is like one of the most gut-wrenching feelings, and like most of us did not set out to be parents and to ever think that our children would not want to speak to us, and so we're dealing with, like, as parents, we're dealing with like the shame, the embarrassment, the heartbreak, and then trying to make sense of it, and like in the guilt and the what did I do wrong, and do they not love me, am I not enough? I mean, in 2013, I had a court case about this, and I remember, I had therapy at the time, so I had support. And at the same time, I still internalized a lot of it, and I felt awful. And, there were times where, I didn't even care if I was alive, and that's pretty messed up because I had other, more children too, and a family. And, I was married again at the time, and I still had a lot to live for. And so I really, went over several years, like on my own healing journey of breaking apart everything that happened. Um, and then more recently, it started to happen again, with another child of mine. And so, it really had me pause and like look at every single piece and break it apart.
Mhm.
And some key things that, I have come to the conclusion on is that it's really not about the children. Parental alienation is an extension of domestic abuse.
Mhm.
So it is an extension of control and manipulation. It is an extension of the alienator not taking responsibility for their own actions, for their own healing. It's an extension of making you the problem. It's an extension of making you look bad to other people. And the kids are caught in the middle. They're caught in the middle because I will tell you one thing for sure, that I was not a perfect mom, okay? But I'm a really good mom. And I know for a fact that my kids love me, even if they can't tell me that.
Mhm.
And that is the hardest thing to discern because it doesn't look like it, it doesn't feel like it. And so we have to like dig deep in our souls to remember like that bond is unbreakable.
Mhm.
You carried that child in your uterus for 9 months. He didn't, like you have this unbreakable bond. And this is the message that I want anyone who's been alienated from their child to understand. Like there is so much pain that it's muddying the waters. And it's something that people don't see. So it gets all of this, this dismissal, this it's the children's choice, that's what they want. No, it's not normal for kids not to be okay to talk to their parents or see them or love them or acknowledge them. That's not healthy. Those kids are going to end up, and unless they have some kind of guidance or inspiration or whatever, it is, a roadmap for mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is a very hard place for the parent that is being alienated and the child, because the child, they're stuck. What are they
Absolutely.
supposed to do? And I've worked with so many families, and I've seen this so many times. It's like, and it's so defeating, so defeating, and there's nothing anybody can do really to help them.
It's interesting because I don't know if you've heard of Stockholm Syndrome,
Yeah.
right? From 1973, a bank robbery, and the people involved ended up defending, the captor. And it is very similar in other forms of abuse or control or, even trafficking, where the person who is being controlled or in captive, etc., they're in survival mode. They're trying to survive. So for them to be able to like acknowledge and admit, the gravity of what happened, they make excuses for the controller, the abuser. They even develop affection, they defend them, and this just kind of plays in the mind trap of how defeating it feels at times. It's like, like, am I, like, what kind of world am I living in? Like, this doesn't even seem right. It seems like it's not accurate. Like, am I the only one who is seeing this? Like what's going on here? And that's why it's really like so important to pick it apart and like identify the patterns and to be able to see like this is abuse. This is not the children choosing. And so often, like someone will say, well, my son is in his 20s, or I have a daughter who's 30 and she's not talking to me. And I will ask, well, when did the parental alienation start? And if it started as a child, they've never had the tools or the resources to be able to heal that. That was never a choice for them. So they were still stuck in the trap even as an adult, because you would think like as an adult they would be able to discern and kind of see through that, but not if they haven't had, healing or resources or things like that.
And that's important. What you just said is so important, because in a lot of the work that I've done, the children that grow up and that being groomed, and that's what it is. They're being
Yeah,
groomed all through this. That's their
definitely.
normal. That's
Hmm.
all they know. They don't
Yeah.
know that there's anything different. And then
Right.
somebody starts to say, no, look, this is what's happening. They don't believe it because that's still their parent. And
Hmm.
that's hard. That's hard to fight that. Oh man, I see that all the time. And
Yeah.
I think there's a term for it, emotional incest, that
Hmm.
happens. And or the child is parentified with the alienator.
Hmm.
And those types of behaviors start way before the divorce or way before, we had Dr. Cochiola, Coachella. Coach Sheila. I'm sorry, Dr. C. She's really well known in coercive control, and she talks about confirmation bias. And it's when, maybe it starts out very small where the child will talk to the alienating parent, like mom's so upset today, isn't she? Or even mom's kind of toxic, isn't she? And so that child continues to go to the state or the alienating parent, and they kind of form this bond, this mutual bond
Mhm.
of talking about the safe parent. And that is when, trauma bonds start to, form. And it's kind of like you're going up a uphill battle with, a muddy hill, and you're sliding down, and you can't believe that this is happening, because this is a child that you raised and loved and cared for and nurtured, but you're now becoming the villain in their story. And it's not just their story, it's siding with the abusive parent too, and this is, I mean, it's, call it for what it is, it's child abuse. And there's so many things that are so wrong with this type of situation. A healthy, normal parent is not going to engage in those types of behaviors with children, and start to say, oh yeah, mom is kind of like that. Mom is that. And it's just a toxic type thing that you can hardly get yourself up and out of, and try to, I guess, defeat those situations once the tracks are laid. It's hard to get the child to see what's happening. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wanted to throw that in there because we had a really great conversation with Dr. C. And please, I totally messed up her last name. I know that. But she really is an amazing, she articulated that so well. And I wanted just to kind of stick that in our conversation as how these dynamics start to happen in that relationship. And more than likely those alienating behaviors started way before the divorce. And it's hard. That's a hard kind of thing to deal with once the tracks have been laid.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's planting seeds of doubt and mistrust, in the child, and then they grow, they're seeded and watered and they grow. And then you have a plant there or a tree, and it's really, really tricky because children, really like they know they're half of their mom and half of their dad. And like, so they internalize it. Like, I'm part of my dad, I'm part of my mom. Like, why not be able to honor both, parts, both sides? I mean, there's examples of children who were, sexually abused by their parent, and they still wanted to live with that parent.
Mhm.
So why? Like, that's one of my questions with parental alienation. Why, when you have a good parent, does the child not want to see them?
I was just going to speak on that too, is I worked in the domestic violence field for a very long time. And you would even see children who were sexually assaulted, physically beaten, um, still want to have a relationship with that abuser.
Mhm.
Or, and you're thinking in your mind, why would you ever want a relationship with this parent? But I think that's the part of parental alienation is that they've been coached. And that's how you know it's been parental alienation,
Mhm.
is that this child has been, whether or not they realize it now or 20 years
Mhm.
down the road, but they have been manipulated and coached in a way that they do not want a relationship with a parent who's you know not done that. um so
Well, in
yeah.
a healthy relationships, when two people decide to divorce, I've seen a lot of times where they work together for what's in the best interest of the child. And, you have healthy parents who are co-parenting or whatever, but they're doing what's in the best interest of the child. It's kind of obvious when one parent is downplaying the other parent and talking about the other parent and planting all those seeds in the mind of the child. It's pretty obvious for those of us outside looking in to see what's going on, but then the child is there in the midst of that, and they're really kind of being forced to choose one parent over the other based on how they're going to be treated, or what they're going to be like in teenagers, what they're going to be given, and stuff like that, which is typical teenage stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see that a lot too.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many nuances and so many forms of it, that it really covers a lot of bases for sure.
Mhm. Um, I have a question about like the court system and things like that. What are the biggest kind of gaps that you're seeing with parental alienation and how the courts handle these types of cases? Do you know anything about, that situation or, you know,
Yes, I mean, from my own experiences and some of the people that I worked with, what my perspective is that the court does not recognize parental alienation.
I don't. Yeah.
And they definitely do not recognize it as abuse. In my experience, they think it is the child's choice. That because in my experiences and conversations I've had, and maybe, in other court systems, there are more advancements. But my experience has been if they can't see it, they don't believe it. So they
My
will look
experience
at
as well.
physical abuse, they will look at sexual abuse, where there's facts and there's evidence. But the things that are coercive and invisible abuse, it does not get any weight.
No, it's one word against the other, and you can't prove it.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
told. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, I battled that in the court system twice myself, and I didn't get anywhere, but I didn't get anywhere within the court system. But what I did do was I advocated for myself. I wrote out my own motion at the time. I became very articulate in the ways of invisible abuse. Now, even though I did not make progress in the court system, I believe that it put their antenna up. So maybe if it wasn't my case that could progress in this invisible abuse, maybe somebody else's case behind me could. And it really helped me. I feel like it was like just doing that alone was a healing journey, and so I began to develop other tools. Like, okay, so like no one's going to stick up for me, right? So I'm going to stick up for myself. I'm going to figure out like how I can empower myself, how I can talk to other people about this. Like, what am I going to say? Going back to like the shame and the embarrassment too, like I looked at those pieces too. And I just started like taking action where I could, you know, and so it can feel defeating to not get anywhere in court, but you really have to be able to turn that pain into power and do your own journeys. Stand up for yourself, be seen, be heard, um, share your story, use your voice, like find support, be the support, whatever you can do, because to sit there and just think I lost, like that's defeating.
Yeah.
We have to be able to keep moving and to make something bigger of it.
Mhm.
And that's such a hard place to be, because when you're in that situation and you've lived through that, and I see this with others that I work with, you're already so beaten down, it's hard to stand up for yourself
Mhm.
because you're
Yeah.
used to that. You're in that mindset of being torn down so much, and all the horrible things that are said to you and put into your brain, that time where we have parents who are going through this and actually going through the court system, that's really hard for them to stand up and advocate for themselves, which again is why we're doing this, to help people, to show them that you can advocate for yourself, you can stand up, and it's hard, but there are lots of supports that you can bring in, and there are lots of counseling and other advocates and supports, and that's why we're trying to grow this network of
Mhm.
showing that. Because when you said, in the very beginning of this, and you said, if I can help one person, it made all my stuff worth it. I said that 39
Yeah.
years ago. I said
Yeah.
37 years ago. I said that. Um,
Yeah.
and that's been kind of the driving force behind this, because
Mhm.
this is something that is not easy to prove. It's not easy. The courts don't recognize it a lot of times because they don't see it, they don't know. Documenting is important, showing a pattern of abuse is important, being able to show a pattern of behaviors is important. So many of these things that I'm sure you've seen in your work is you're just so beaten down that how do you stand up? What would be like the first thing that we could help someone do? And I know
Mhm.
what I told Danielle a long time ago. I probably shouldn't say it here, but you got to dig down deep. You've got to dig
Yeah.
really down deep and find that inner voice for yourself. And what would you like? What is your take on that, or your advice on that for someone who's in the midst of that struggling? Like, how do
Oh,
I do that? How do I advocate for myself?
I love that. I
Yeah.
think I think the first step of that is to really like feel your feelings and be in your pain. I think recognizing our own pain is the first step,
Yeah.
because like oftentimes it's like people are afraid to do that because it hurts. You cry, you're in bed, you can't get up, like, like you don't want to go on. And like saying that this is real, like I feel like this, like you have to acknowledge that or it's going to keep coming up until you can't turn away from it anymore. And it's going to get louder and it's going to get angrier and it's going to make a mess out in public or something. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it happens. And so, and I know, so I think that being able to process the pain and the hurt and the betrayal and the isolation and the abandonment and all of like those core wounds, you have to face them. And that sounds like I don't want to. It's ugly. It's like vulnerable. Yeah, it is. All of it. But that is an important key. Okay. And if not, you're going to get sick. You're going to like, not, you're going to like, um, not have good quality of relationships moving forward because it's going to be the only thing that you're going to be able to talk about because you
Yeah,
won't
and
be able
it's
to
so
move on
important to
from it.
recognize that. You
Yeah.
mentioned trafficking. I've done a lot of work around here in the anti-trafficking movement, and I've a lot of street outreach and working. These women don't even know they're being trafficked.
Yeah.
A lot of times in those situations, you don't even know that what you're going through is abuse. Somebody's just
Yeah.
mean, or this just isn't fair, or this isn't, you don't even realize that what's happening to you is abuse.
Yeah.
And
Because I think generally people want to move on. They want to like get past it and like it's over, right? So we don't have to talk about it anymore. We don't have to go there anymore. Um, but being able to get it out of our bodies, and process it, like whether that's screaming or crying or, watching a sad movie and going for walks, going for rage runs, as fast as you can, like healthy ways like that to get some of that pain out of your body, is so important. Writing, journaling, seeing yourself. And then definitely, I think support, being able to talk to or have, someone who's been through it, who understands, who has resources, you know, um, not even all therapists are trained in this or know all the nuances of
You're
this or
right.
can recognize it. So you have to have someone who understands it and gets it. And then also, like, even one thing I did in 2013, and this was early, but I started to like do research, and I was getting advice on like empowerment. And so I watched Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on body language. And so if you like open up your body or make space with your body, it can help you to feel more powerful. So before I went into court on the custody thing in 2013, I went in the bathroom and I stood there for like 3 minutes with my arms spread out and, my feet apart and just taking up space, and just like,
I love that.
just getting my energy right, my mindset right. And there's so many tools. Like I literally have like such a library, but I think to start with some simple things like that, allow yourself to process the pain. And it's not a one and done kind of thing. You might process it one day and you're good for a week, 2 weeks, and then it comes up again.
Mhm.
Allow yourself the space to feel it and heal it and do that as many times as you need to. That's not wrong. That's not weakness. It's
No, and
actually
I learned that,
powerful.
and I coach that way now. Is do it, be in the moment, get the therapy, do the EMDR therapy.
Mhm.
Don't wait the 20 some years like I did,
Mm,
because it will come back.
yeah,
You
you know
can't
that
push
too,
it
right?
down. Your
Yeah.
body keeps, I mean, there's the book on that, your body
Mhm.
keeps score, your
Yes.
body knows. And it's all in there. And it will keep creeping back until you get it out and heal it and help it to move on. And that's
Mhm.
so important. Just because you'll be stuck. And you're right, it does affect relationships. It affects so many things. I just
Mhm.
think people just don't understand how much it does really affect you in your personal relationships and work relationships and so many things. And it will come and get you like at the worst possible moment.
Mhm.
It will pop
Yeah.
back up. Yeah, it
Yeah, it affects every area of our lives.
I
does.
was
Everyone.
going to say really quick, I think that parental alienation towards a mother, and I'm only speaking in women terms, but it goes against everything, right? Like we are, I mean, it's our natural instinct, nurturing and loving and caring. And we always, from a young age, I mean, that's what we, thought of as being a mom and that mother bear instinct. It's in us. I mean, it's, you'd stand in front of a moving train or a bullet for your child.
Mhm.
And when someone tries to sever that or mess with that bond, there's no words, I don't think, that you can, we can try to articulate it as much as we can cognitively, but there's something like primal about that relationship. And when you carry a baby, when you love, nurture from baby on up, and then they're choosing, because they've been manipulated to reject you. Oh, it's the most, vulnerable spot I think you find yourself in life that is just hard to like there's no book, there's no quick fix, there's no, like you said, there's no quick fix. You have to go through it. You have to go through the process of, you know, healing and making sense of what just happened, the injustice that you feel. And that's really, really difficult. And especially, I think, with the court system set up in the ways in which it is, because, what can you prove? Is what it goes back to, is what can you prove? And these are subtle things. These are very, it's often kind of referred to as the invisible gas, the carbon monoxide of the relationship. And how do you prove that? And is there any ways or tips that you've been able to kind of give some insiders tips? I mean, this has been a little while for you since you went through the court system, but is there something that you've learned along the ways that can help someone else that might be entering the court system now?
Yeah, I mean, I actually did also I filed a motion a few years ago. So I had two different experiences. I think with the court system, like document everything for sure. And get to know the patterns of parental alienation, and so you can identify the patterns. Like that's where your power is in the patterns. And also do work outside, like do not rely on the court system to protect you. Okay, you also have to do your own work, your own healing, your own processing. Um, so you coming at it from both angles, okay? And I think like one of the important things to state is that we really want to be aware of holding duality, of holding the pain, because, like as you mentioned, it is just like this unbearable ache that is not normal, to be able to hold that. And when you experience, I've learned that when you experience like such pain at such a depth, you actually have a capacity to experience a much greater joy, at that depth, because they're polar opposites. So when you go deep in pain, you're able to go deep in happiness, in healing too. So you have to be okay with, okay, this is sad. This is a sad part of my day. Like I'm having a moment. I'm missing my child. I feel this feels awful. It feels not natural. And then, in the evening, you're having a conversation with one of your friends and you're laughing and you're having a great time. You have to be okay with the pain and the happiness, in having both, because otherwise it can feel like it's not right for you to be happy. Like you can't be happy until you have your kids back, until you have your Disneyland family story back. And often so many of us kind of grew up, thinking we were going to have a Disneyland family, and so you have to redefine what motherhood means to you too. If you're not able to see your children or you have a limited time to see them, then redefine it. Like, what is that going to look like? Are you going to do your healing work and your processing of the emotions you feel before so that when you see them, you're present, you're on, you don't say anything about their dad, you focus on, what are they doing in school? How's it going? What are they looking forward to? What is your favorite meal? And like that, like that is the stuff that I don't know either,
Mm.
because that's been taken from me. And that feels really sad, So there's also, holding the hope that they will see through it, and really like I want to encourage people to send their children love energetically, to send them like healing vibes energetically. I think sometimes we do not realize the power of energy and that we really do have power to send them love, to say, like, like, I know this isn't your fault. I know you're stuck in the trap. I know you're just trying to survive. I know that you really, really wanted to be acknowledged by your father, and now you have it. Like, I know you're just trying to get what you need. We have to be able to remember that this is like their journey too. And something in them, is just trying to like make things right, and maybe some will see it, with time, and maybe they won't. But like as mothers, we have to keep living our lives because we want, with the possibility that they can come back and they can say, hey, like, I do love you, I missed you, or, you know, I see the way that dad was, and who do we want to show up as at that point? You want to be whole, you want to be healthy, you want to be happy. You don't want to have resentment towards them. You don't want to blame them. Like they don't need any more pressure. They need love, they need comfort, and they need safety. So we have to build ourselves up in this process to be that lighthouse for them.
Mm.
Yeah, that's powerful
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting being a lighthouse for them and doing your own healing journey because there is that propensity to want to be so angry about it and get the injustice, all this has been done, perpetrated onto you. It's and then, when you see them to want to, hey, let me explain how this, went down and all this kind of stuff, and let me show you the proof and everything. But it's what it creates is the child truly feels like they're trapped in this toxic spinning nightmare. They want to just get out. They just want to love both parents. And that's the hard part is holding back and just allowing them to come to their own conclusion and you being okay with whether or not they ever see it or they, whatever. And yeah, that's so tricky to navigate those waters. And there is just no quick fixes there. You're just one day at a time marching through life. And I love what you said about building a life for yourself because you do want to be whole. And you know, you can hold sadness in one hand and you can hold happiness in the other. And those two can coexist. And I think that's what's really important about healing is that it's okay to feel your feelings. You have every right to feel how you feel, but not letting that cup spill over into a point where it just annihilates anything good in your life. So you have to really build up yourself. And that is probably the hardest work that you'll ever do as a woman, because it's, we've been taught at such a young age to give and be fixers and nurturing everyone around us, but we neglect ourselves so often. And this journey in particular, I think strips everything away from you, and you really get a sense of who you are. You see the, I'm not so great in this area and I'm not, I'm okay in this area. And you try to work on the spots where you may have had blind spots in some things. And I think it's a really empowering journey. If, I had heard someone say one time that it was a gift. Parental alienation was a gift. And that just struck me as so messed up at the time. I was just, how in the world can you say that this is a gift? When you're not seeing your child, when you're not being a part of their everyday life or whatever. But I think you have a lot of discernment in what you put in your life. And you're more boundaried and you don't put up with certain things that you once did. And it is a gift to yourself because you do get to replace some really toxic maybe behaviors or toxic things that you allowed to slip past you, and you rebuild your life kind of block by block. And now you feel a sense of wholeness when your child does enter your life again. You're not going to do the toxic back and forth, because for so long maybe the dynamics were there. They, you played this game, the dynamics, of this person or that person. But yeah, I think what you have to say is so powerful. And also, I love the fact that you're giving voice to survivors, because so often there is those naysayers or people who, weren't in your relationship but seem to know everything about your relationship. And, what do you think is the best way to deal with those types of people who might say, you know what, this didn't happen. I was around them all the time. There's no way this could have happened. And dealing with that, because on top of everything else, you'll have those people in the background that just didn't see it that way. I saw him as being this or that, or she was always this or that. And it's like, no, you don't really know the intimacy of the family dynamics and how that works. So is there any advice that you can speak to that?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great question. I think first you have to see yourself. You have to see your story and know what you went through and recognize that. And, like I think journaling is amazing for this. Write out some of the experiences, write out what happened, write out how messed up it was, because then when you can do that and you can see yourself and you can have, one or two or three people that you can go to who see you deeply, who say, I know, like, I got your back. I understand. I see you. I know that this was abuse. I know that this was manipulation and control. When you can build that for yourself, then you're going to be okay if somebody doesn't believe you. You're going to be okay if someone doesn't like you because of it. You're going to be okay not having to be understood. You're going to be okay if somebody doesn't believe you, because you believe yourself, you believe your story, and you have those couple people, for support to remind you of who you are and that you are valid, and you also like, here's the thing too. When you do this kind of work and you show up for yourself and you see yourself and you do the healing work, you're a step ahead. And if you play the long game, and this is the long game, because we don't see instant results. It could be years, it could be a decade. And I'm sorry, but sometimes, it can be that long, you know. But when you do that and you play the long game and you like have this vision of, the reunification, and because you've done the healing work, because you've been able to process all of this, you're a step ahead and your children will see the contrast. Because I'll tell you what, the person doing the alienating is not doing any of that.
Sure. Yeah.
No, they're not healing. They're not self-aware. They're not taking responsibility. The kids will eventually see that. And it is a long game. So you have to be willing to play the long game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find myself lately saying, you know what you've been told. You know what
Hmm.
you've been told.
Hmm.
You haven't always been told the truth.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Well, thank you.
Well, Elisa, I could talk to you all day. I mean, I'm sitting here, just amazed with our conversation. And I think that you are so powerful. You've done the work. And when I came across your TikTok, I just kind of scrolled through your videos. I'm like, oh, she gets it. She's so powerful, and your message comes across so clear. And I really, really appreciate that. And I would love to maybe have you on another time too, if you ever want to. And how do you, if you were to kind of give one piece of advice to survivors out there, or someone who's just kind of coming into this, doesn't kind of know what's going on, is there any lasting piece of hope that you can give someone as we kind of close up our conversation today?
Yeah, know that that bond between you and your child cannot be erased. It's always there. Like maybe it's hidden, but it can be uncovered. It can be found again. And so you have to be the light. You have to hold that for both you and your child because we need to discern and recognize that they are caught in the trap, that they are in survival mode, they are being abused. And we are the ones who have the tools and the resources, and we need to make the most of it because that is where the healing and the longevity, the long game is going to happen. We we know that trauma is passed down through DNA. Okay. Healing can also be passed down. So do the healing work and your children will get it.
Love that. Alisa, thank you so much for your conversation and your open-heartedness today. And where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
Well, I put all of my best content on TikTok for parental alienation. So that would definitely be the place to find me. I have a website, alisadivine.com as well. And my books are on Amazon that are about domestic abuse and a little bit on parental alienation. So any of those three places, send me a message, an email, and I am happy to continue more of these conversations.
That's
Wonderful.
great.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank you
much.
for being brave enough to share your story.
Thank you so much for having me and opening this important conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So our little disclaimer at the end is that Stronger Roots, our mission is to keep raising awareness, pushing for change, and giving a voice to the stories that too often go unheard. If today's episode was helpful for you, please share it with someone who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe for our upcoming conversations. And thanks for joining today. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.